Major funding for this special Frontline series is provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide. Additional funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Tonight, a Frontline special series of portraits of the people of the Soviet Union. Dr. Svyatoslav Fyodorov is a famous Soviet eye surgeon. He developed an operation for nearsightedness that brings patients from all over the world to his hospital in Moscow. And he's handsomely rewarded for his efforts by the Soviet system, which is not always as egalitarian as we might think. Tonight, Doctor in Moscow.
From the network of public television stations, a presentation of KCTS Seattle, WNET New York, WPBT Miami, WTVS Detroit, and WGBH Boston. This is a special Frontline series with Judy Woodruff.
Good evening, and welcome to Comrades, a special Frontline series on life in the Soviet Union. At a time when the Soviet Union seems poised on the edge of dramatic changes, perhaps the most far-reaching since the Russian Revolution, we are bringing this series to you again because of its unique look at how citizens of the Soviet Union live and work, because of its rare insight into some of their dreams, attitudes, and values. Comrades was made by a team of producers from the British Broadcasting Corporation. They spent 2 years traveling throughout the Soviet Union. They were allowed access rarely granted a Western film crew. Tonight, the story of a privileged eye surgeon, a member of the Russian elite. The program is called Doctor in Moscow. At the end, I'll be back to talk to the series producer and with 2 journalists who have reported from Moscow for years to measure the changes going on in Russia today and the impact of these changes on the people in this film. The film is narrated by Richard Denton.
Moscow, a prestigious apartment building not far from the city center. At 15 rubles a month, that's about $20, rents are no higher here than for any other Soviet housing. But these apartments are reserved for those in positions of power and authority. Svyatoslav Nilolaevich Fyodorov, an eminent eye surgeon, lives here with his wife Irene.
Slava, darling, be sure to examine Savelyev today. He called yesterday, but I could tell him nothing.
A cup of coffee.
I'll give you one.
Black cars are usually official in the Soviet Union, and these Volgas and their drivers are provided by the state for people like Fyodorov. Professor Fyodorov is the director of the Moscow Research Institute for Eye Microsurgery. Known worldwide for his inventions and ideas, he is tireless and demanding, both of himself and of his staff.
No, I won't give it to you. You should think of these things earlier. Good morning. I wanted to find some sort of revolutionary method that would help the blind and nearsighted, would somehow make their lives completely normal. Then I read about the English doctor, Ridley. At that time, no one believed in his operations. I decided his idea was very good, but just needed further development, some perfecting.
Fyodorov's first lens implantation operations were so revolutionary that they caused an outcry within the medical profession and his work was stopped. He persisted and managed to break through the cumbersome bureaucracy and continue the operations.
Doctor, they're ready for you in the operating room. Theater 4.
All right.
Applications for refractive keratoplasty must be also considered. It is possible to make radial incision as well as a concentric rings and crescents, allowing the shape of the cornea apex to be controlled. Interesting. Yes.
You must read this, okay?
Now, 25 years after this row, he sells his lenses and techniques all over the world. And with the valuable foreign currency this earns him, he's able to supplement the budget he gets from the state and run this institute as if it were his own with all the latest Western technology. Music always plays in the operating theatre to relax the patients who are only under local anesthetic. General anesthetic is used less frequently in the Soviet Union, even for operations like appendectomies.
Good morning.
Hello.
The hospital gowns have been specially designed by top Soviet fashion designer Slava Zaitsev to afford a maximum of comfort and a modicum of style.
Make that little knife ready. The one for cataract. At first it was difficult. I didn't even have a microscope. It's very hard to implant a lens without a microscope because it's very small. I had to make the lens at home in the kitchen because no one made them then and you couldn't buy them anywhere. I implanted the lens using an ordinary little microscope which stood on a stool. I put a lot of heavy books on it so it wouldn't fall over. I did this first lens implant operation on a 12-year-old girl. I was very scared it wouldn't work, but happily it was very successful. The girl is now grown up. This was 25 years ago. She's now 37. She's a teacher. She's got a son, who she's named Svyatoslav after me. It really is green. This is that cosmonaut Volkov's mother.
The one who died?
Yes.
Nowadays, the patients that Fyodorov deals with himself tend to be the ones he finds unusual or interesting. This can mean ordinary citizens, but may also mean members of the higher echelons of Soviet society and foreigners who've made the trip to Moscow especially to be treated by him. One operation that has attracted a great deal of Western attention is one he perfected, radial keratotomy, a cure for nearsightedness.
When I first went to America, I saw the film Sleeper. Woody Allen was playing the lead. The doctors of the future, some 1,000 years ahead, were wearing glasses, as was Woody Allen. I was struck by this illogical detail. The writer and director of the film had changed everything in life, with the exception of glasses. I thought this can't be right. It can't be that man, who invented spectacles 700 years ago, couldn't come up with something better in the future. When I returned to Moscow, a boy who had damaged his cornea entered our clinic. As a result of this damage to his eye, his nearsightedness disappeared. It became clear that chance damage to the cornea, the boy broke his glasses boxing with a friend, a bit of glass cut the cornea, made it flatter, and the boy could see better. So, then I decided that if his friend, a 16-year-old kid, could cure nearsightedness with his fist, then surely I could too. At first, many of my colleagues, other doctors, were against it. They said that glasses are terrific. Nearsightedness is wonderful. But that's just the usual dogmatism of people who are used to the old ways. It's the usual story. No one wants to change their habits or to change their traditions, even in medicine.
The cornea is marked with up to 16 lines, and incisions are made along each line. The cornea now becomes flatter, so that it bends light in such a way that images are focused on or near the retina instead of in front of it. In the USSR, there's little choice in eyeglass frames, and contact lenses are rare, so this 15-minute operation is popular. Fyodorov has performed it on thousands of patients over the last 10 years. In the United States since 1978, upwards of 75,000 Americans have undergone keratotomy at $1,500 per eye. The Western world is often skeptical of Soviet medicine, much of which has a poor reputation abroad and in the USSR itself.
It doesn't only depend on the specific system of a country. It depends on the people who head this or that clinic. I look at every clinic as though it were an orchestra. If an orchestra has a good conductor, even if it's in a small town, it can be wonderful and be the best in the country. But at the same time, if a clinic doesn't have a good conductor, then it can be rather mediocre.
This is a special food for cosmonauts, and we took from them also. Stalled. Nice, beautiful. Very nice test.
A new cafe has opened just off Gorky Street, and the Fyodorovs are not the only ones eager to try it out. Those waiting in line, however, seem instantly to recognize the Fyodorovs' right not to. This is not an egalitarian society, nor does it pretend to be one.
I work harder. It's natural. Socialism doesn't simply mean everyone's the same. Socialism means payment for labor. So if I work more, I get paid more. There are workers who have difficult, highly skilled jobs, who also earn huge, well, the same money as I do. A miner who mines a lot of coal. He has a difficult, risky job. He earns even more than I do. There's a whole range of other rare professions where people also live extremely well. Artists, writers. They have wonderful country houses here, wonderful setups, cars. And what of it? That's normal. That's how it should be. The main thing is not to exploit others. You must exploit yourself, your body, your brain, your intellect, but you mustn't exploit anyone else.
The Fyodorovs, with their 4 daughters, are an unusually large family in a part of the USSR where only one child is the norm. The youngest, at 15, lives separately with her grandmother. The 3 out with their parents tonight are all married and all, untypically, have homes of their own. One is an eye surgeon on her father's staff, another is studying to be an ophthalmologist, and the third is studying languages.
I don't know what this is. Maybe some sort of pie.
No, that there.
That's plov, a rice dish.
No, look, that in the pot.
That's some sort of pastry.
It's a museum.
Champagne.
Yes. Ira, do you want some?
Pass the champagne over here.
I tried on the machine, and when I should have turned the pedal, how he yelled at me. I was sent flying.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Here's to nothing.
However late, Fyodorov still finds time to fit in some more work before bed. Life is not all work, however. And like many Russians, Fyodorov has a dacha, some 70 kilometers from Moscow. We weren't able to accept his invitation to visit and film him there, as it's in a so-called closed area that foreigners may not visit.
Man should feel the link with nature. Otherwise, he won't be a happy person. In order to be happy, as Edgar Allan Poe said, you need people to love you. The more the better. You need to do creative work, something new every day. And you need contact with nature. And you must do everything without expecting any thanks.
No thanks, maybe, but plenty of rewards. This is one of 2 horses that he privately owns, and he rides them as often as he can. Many of Fyodorov's days begin here, at the impressive Olympic swimming pool complex. And it's here, as Fyodorov emerges on his hands, that you realize something else about him. He's had to overcome the handicap of having only one good leg. His early ambition was to be a pilot, but an accident in his mid-teens robbed him of his leg and of that ambition. He eventually decided upon medicine. Here too, Western pop music soothes exercising Muscovites. To enter the care of Fyodorov's institute, you must be referred by a doctor from your local health clinic. Surgeons are usually men, but general practice is regarded as women's work. It's low prestige and poorly paid, 130 rubles a month to a bus driver's 200. Once your doctor has referred you to the institute, unless it's serious, you'll have to wait for 6 months to a year for your operation, much as you would for a small operation in Britain.
Marisa, take a seat.
Point her out to me later, all right? Today's the 5th.
Marissa is a radio reporter who recently interviewed Fyodorov and jumped to the top of the waiting list for her operation. Fyodorov is adept at working the system and uses the media to change things for the better. A party member, and only 9% of the population are, with his standing, he can afford to be openly critical.
Провода ломаются, контакты отваливаются, лампочки перегорают, нет запасных.
Неужели вам приходится работать с бракованным инструментом?
Я вынужден, как правило, как-то приспосабливаться, где-то его в кустарных условиях ремонтировать. То есть мы ведь вручаем жизнь человека в руки техники. И поэтому некачественная медицинская техника, она становится очень опасной для ее применения. Наша промышленность вполне могла бы освоить эту продукцию. Но просто нет заводов, нет мощностей, нет заинтересованности в создании медицинской аппаратуры. Плана по медицинской продукции не существует. И если даже и вставляется им в план, то, как правило, первое, что завод, когда не выполняет план, снимает с производства, это медицинское оборудование. Если уж оценивать, что главней, то я думаю, что главнее всего для человечества и для человека, в частности, это здоровье. Проблема в том, что мы не можем, ни сами потребители, мы, врачи, не имеем права отказаться от этой техники. Мы не можем ее забраковать. У нас, у потребителей, нет прав. Этими правами обладает при министерстве такая союзмедтехника, которая абсолютно за мои 32 года работы в медицине никогда ни один представитель не был в моей операционной, ни один представитель союзмедтехники не был где-либо в нашей поликлинике. Поэтому непонятно, как они могут знать тот уровень, который мне необходим для моей работы, если они никогда здесь не бывают. А право решающего голоса имеют, а я не имею права голоса. Я, например, вот как директор института крупного, не знаю, что через 5 лет будет выпускать медицинская промышленность для вот тех операций, которые я делаю сейчас и собираюсь делать в будущем. То есть между нами имеется огромная стена непонимания. И в результате этого они делают то, что им выгодно, то, что им легче, а я ничего не могу сделать.
Fyodorov knows that interviews like this on Moscow's radio station ensure prompt attention.
You'll make that eye beautiful.
One of today's patients is 6-year-old Sashenka from the Ukraine. She's in for a lens implantation. She's traveled hundreds of miles with her mother to be treated in Fyodorov's clinic.
Травматично, ножницами.
Грубец. Да, по-моему, на 12 часах хорошо. Нет, он грамм до 9 спускается.
Fyodorov's wife Irene was a gynecologist, but now assists her husband in the operating theatre.
She fell on a pair of scissors. She was in a hospital in the Ukraine for 2 weeks. There was no improvement. She couldn't open her eye at all. She was being injected with the strongest antibiotics. Nothing did any good. So they said to us, get on a plane and go, because the only man who can save you is Dr. Fyodorov. He had a look at her and said, the little girl has her whole life ahead of her. I'll do the operation myself. Dr. Fyodorov says that after the lens implantation, she'll be able to run and jump and, of course, see properly.
Sashenka's mother, like all visitors, is required to wear a white coat in the interests of hygiene.
Hold the little darling, the little beauty, little darling, little one. The operation is over. She's asleep. It all went very well. So in 2 or 3 hours, they'll bring her here. You'll be here, will you? Everything's fine. She's asleep.
Oh, what a beauty, what a beautiful eye you've got. The thing I like best is going to the ward after an operation and seeing the patients' happy faces. The doctor becomes like a drug addict. He wants to do more, to see more and more of these happy people. His life becomes unbelievably interesting because he feels that he's not living for nothing, that he's doing something very useful. Everyone will say, "Thank you, doctor, you've helped me. I'll never forget you. I'll remember you for the rest of my life." It's very important for a person to feel he's useful. Look, how many fingers?
2.
How many?
2.
And now?
5.
And now?
1.
And now?
2.
You can count well, can't you? The eye looks pretty good. Okay, you can run around tomorrow, but today lie down, okay? What's making it smart? Is it really smarting?
It smarts terribly.
Well, we'll put a drop of something in to make it stop.
We'll put a new bandage on.
Please.
Everything's fine.
Doctor, can I get up today?
Yes. But after a mild anesthetic, you're a bit...
I feel dizzy.
That's why someone should accompany you if you want to walk. We'll ask a nurse or someone.
And I can eat and drink?
As much as you like.
Oh, my little one. You feel better now?
I'm thirsty.
You're thirsty. Oh, you mustn't drink.
I can. I already had a drink.
Well, they gave you one? Well, they shouldn't have.
It must be all right. The doctor gave it to me.
You like it here? What don't you like?
I want Mama.
Fyodorov's latest brainchild is a conveyor belt. The patient moves automatically from doctor to doctor as each performs a stage of the operation.
Oh, Robert. Did you find the equipment? Yes. This is beautiful.
Custom made in West Germany, the conveyor has cost $850,000 in valuable foreign currency. But by selling his own technology to the West, Fyodorov can afford it.
Of course, we could have made it here, but we had to buy German microscopes, as they're the best at the moment. So we decided to give them everything, so that they could put it all together and assemble it quicker. Because time is more valuable than money.
There are still some details to be worked out, perfected.
Oh, fantastic. Our patients say that if they're being operated on...
Our patient said, the doctors will operate and we will ride.
Yeah, that's right.
And yesterday, very nice, one of our patients said that most important that I like this conveyor belt. Why? Because I know when my operations will be finished. I know 2 steps, now 3 steps, 9 minutes, all will be done. All will be done.
The opinion of the doctor as the one who can do everything is old. It's the opinion of those who think of a doctor as some sort of magician or wizard. In fact, nowadays it's technology, not doctors, that cure people. An average doctor using this apparatus and instruments can get excellent results. Just as a brilliant doctor who doesn't have the apparatus or instruments will get bad results. So the doctor's personality is less important in today's medicine.
Hospitals the world over are not noted for their cuisine. Like many in the Soviet Union, Sashenka's mother has prepared her daughter's food herself. Sashenka will have one more trip to make for some final laser treatment. Fyodorov has his own private dining room. Here he combines a post-operative checkup on 2 hunting companions with the chance to catch up on the season's news.
Are there any ducks?
Masses of them. Across the Volga in one place.
Really?
The lakes there aren't thawing.
Is that so?
Still iced over. Gustel went across the Volga and got nothing there.
Там у него ничего не получилось. А вот ребят, которые охотились на Волге, в Черебаево, там полно было.
I love weapons because I'm a man. All men should love weapons. It's in our blood. This love of weapons and hunting. It's natural. That's what men are like. Those are our hormones. Women like looking after children, and we like hunting and getting food that way.
You see, it's Dr. Watson, not Sherlock Holmes.
One of the twins has popped round with her husband. All of Moscow has spent the past week glued to a new Soviet version of Sherlock Holmes. The Fyodorovs are no exception.
Nikita Mikhailkov's playing Selden. Come on, everyone, let's eat. The tea's wonderful, everyone, straight from the Volga.
Why are these so dry?
They're a little dry. Slava, use your hands. They're delicious, like caramel. Darling, do you want some port? Slava, do you want some melon?
Is it from Bulgaria?
Slava, do you want milk?
Let's drink to the beginning of term.
Yes, to the new school year.
Fyodorov and Irene are due to go abroad. This is a longed-for event for most Soviet citizens, but something the Fyodorovs do often.
When I was young, our people rarely traveled abroad. Now I think that several million Soviets travel abroad each year to different countries. And tourism is growing. It's related to certain objective reasons. It's not that we're afraid that someone will go abroad and stay and not return. Let him stay. Everyone has the right to choose where to live. That's not the issue. You have to give someone money to travel. And in order to give this money, you must have it, earn it. And with our currency situation, it's not that simple. Our currency isn't convertible. We can't exchange our money for other money because we have a different social structure. Many of our people don't earn high wages because the state pays for a great many of our social needs. Transport is practically free. Apartments, for example, this one you're in, now costs me $16 or $20 a month. If I were in New York, I'd probably have to pay about $1,500 for an apartment like this. So it's hard to compare things, and our currency isn't convertible. Money has an entirely different meaning here. You only need money here to eat. Let's say for clothes, for cultural entertainment, but not for transport, not for housing, not for education, not for health care. Therefore, this question of the inconvertibility of our currency has not been resolved yet. So, in practical terms, it's hard for us to change our money for other currency. We lose a lot of money. And of course, this decreases the number of tourists who travel abroad from here. Although there are more of them now.
This is Irene's first visit to London, and although here on business, there is time to enjoy the city.
I like the fact that there's a lot of high-tech merchandise. The choice is broad, and all you need is money. There aren't any shortages or difficulties there. I like the high level of technology in the West, the growth of production, people's accuracy in their work. But at the same time, there are some things I don't like. People's estrangement, people's reserve there. Everyone lives in their own sort of shell. Sometimes it's hard to establish contact with people. And people in the West don't make contact with each other very well. I don't like the fact that all dinner conversations, as a rule, begin and end with money. How to earn money, where to put money, how to spend money, and not spend too much. Everything turns on this question of money. Let's have a look in here.
Do you want to buy something?
I'll find out the prices first.
But if you'd like to see a really beautiful gun, then let me stand.
Very soft, beautiful. Very soft, nice.
You say beautiful,
and
we
how
say
much
Holland and Holland.
two such kind of rifles?
£28,500.
Beautiful.
And these are all made here in London.
The best gun is English gun.
No, not really.
We've also got good guns like these.
Yes, our Tula guns.
Именно те, которые передаем меня.
And our beautiful inlaid guns.
No, they don't compare with these.
Slava, darling, let's get these for you. They don't let the water in. See, they'll be nice and warm for the winter.
Okay, let's take them.
Try them on. How are they? What about those without the trigger finger for hunting?
No, not really.
No? Let's try on these boots, and everything will be okay. Slava, put a sock on. How is it?
Okay.
Хорошо, как раз с носком.
It'll be perfect with a sock. Absolutely perfect.
С носком будет замечательно.
Slava will take these and those darker ones. They're different.
Yes. That's all.
And this is also
Nice.
nice. Nice size.
188.
Yes.
416.
Slava, give me money.
184 and 16.
Сколько? How much?
108 416. Yes. Thank you. Right. Very much. 150. 200. Thank you.
The chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce is supplied by Fyodorov's host, a British doctor who's invited him to see some patients at a London hospital. For them, it may be cheaper and quicker to travel to Moscow for the nearsightedness operation.
You would like to go to Moscow. Can you afford?
It's easier to make some nice, to be kind.
We'll have a lot of trouble National Health getting the finances out for the travel. So why don't you take a 2-week excursion flight out?
Yes, that's why
I work in travel agents.
Oh, good, you get it for nothing.
And
that's it.
After surgery, the next day he have to go to Bolshoi Theater to see ballet.
When do you
Beautiful Russian ballerinas.
When do you want him to come?
What?
When would you like him to come?
I will be all October. Then I will be absent in clinic in November because we will go to American meeting.
That's right.
And then I will come back. I will be all December. January, maybe I will be in Saudi Arabia, maybe.
Yes. Which month would you like?
Next month.
October. Now, he would like to definitely come in October.
Mr. Shokat
Anjari has myopia. -16 in the left eye, -10 in the right. We must enable him to come for consultation and treatment. Help him get a visa, that's all.
Помочь ему с получением визы. Все.
Back in Moscow, the conveyor belt system is in full swing, and Fyodorov now has further plans to automate the diagnostic process and to build a flying operating theater to teach his techniques all over the Soviet Union, in India, and in Cuba.
The Institute is the child of new technology. My dream is to create factories of human happiness, because these factories will manufacture happiness for people. People will get better and will feel happy. Their nearest and dearest will also feel happy. I hope I'll manage to build my factory of happiness, and I'll have time to build several such factories in the USSR.
That was Doctor in Moscow. We'll talk about medical care in Soviet society now with 3 people who've spent a lot of time in the Soviet Union. David Shipler, who was New York Times correspondent in Moscow from 1975 to 79. He's the author of the book, Russia, Broken Idols, Solemn Dreams. Paul Quinn Judge is Moscow correspondent for the Christian Science Monitor. And Richard Denton is the series producer for Comrades. Richard, how did you come to choose this doctor?
Well, he's not difficult to choose. He's the most obvious doctor in Moscow.
Is he really? Was he that obvious?
In a sense, yeah, he's very famous. And in a sense, we wanted to touch on medicine, but more to the point, like most of the comrades in the series, they're not there for their most obvious reason. I mean, he's not there for medicine, really. He's there as an example of a particular type. And again, with 20/20 hindsight, he's there because he's the same generation as Gorbachev, though this was filmed under Andropov and Chernenko. Gorbachev didn't arrive out of nowhere. There's a generation of people who are impatient, who are fed up with the system and what it was doing, and impatient to do what they knew could be done. And that's very much his style. But he is unique.
But you're saying he was standing out. You were there 3 or 4 years ago. You're saying he stood out even then, before Gorbachev came to the fore.
Yes, these characters did and still do stand out. But that was really the main reason that we wanted him.
Any restrictions on what you could film in this series, in this show?
Funnily enough, yes. We couldn't film at his dacha. Now, you would be able to now, and I have filmed and have been out there. But at that time, the kind of life he led at the dacha was considered to be a little bit overly privileged to be viewed with any degree of objectivity.
But you could do so now.
Oh yeah, no problem at all.
Now, what is he doing now?
He's opened another section of his institute, and he just goes on from strength to strength, banging around the world and doing what he does. I'm sure he's still frustrated. He must be a great supporter of Gorbachev, and impatient for further changes and more changes and faster and faster and faster.
David, is this doctor the sort of the prototype, do you think, of what Gorbachev would like to see more of in the Soviet Union?
In one sense, in the sense that he has a lot of contact with the West, that he is innovative, that he's thinking for himself. And I knew him a little bit when I was in Moscow 10 years ago, and he told me stories about the trouble he had at first as a young researcher, when the kind of conservatism of the system really wouldn't permit him to do the kind of experimentation that he wanted to do. And he came in one day and found all his laboratory rabbits dead, and he was off to a small town in Siberia to work for a while. In the late 60s, I think it was, or early 70s, he was in New York at a scientific conference and showed me the clipping of an article in the New York Times in which he was quoted making some rather mild criticisms of shortages in medical equipment. Much milder even than what he was talking about on Radio Moscow. So, and for that, he was not allowed to travel outside the Soviet Union for about 10 years.
But how then did someone like that survive? If he indeed was going against the grain of the system over the years, he was able to survive even before Gorbachev came.
Well, I don't know all the ins and outs of his elevation, but this is often done in terms of getting to know the right people, making contacts. If you're a doctor, you have something very valuable to offer people. Western medicines, medical care, access to good facilities. So you can parlay that into advancement.
So he wasn't totally a renegade, we have to understand.
No, I think he knows how to play the system well.
Yeah. Paul, how much of what do you think what Gorbachev wants to do could potentially change the system of medical care in the Soviet Union?
Like everything else, I think they want to change it fundamentally. They would like to get in more of the overachievers like Fyodorov to run the system. They realize that they're facing not only the problem of human resources. Again, you go back to the fundamental issue of mediocrity, the mediocrity of training of many of the doctors, the sort of things that Fyodorov has talked about in the film. You go back to the lack of any infrastructure, the shortages of medicines and other very basic problems, which Gorbachev has identified, but so far hasn't really pushed through any major resolution of the problem.
So is there a realistic hope that might change?
In the long term, if Gorbachev remains in power and if he remains on this, keeps his policies along the same lines, yes. But yet again, it's going to be a tremendously long struggle.
One of the problems is that when there are shortages, and in the medical care business there are lots of shortages, people find other ways to get access to the goods and services they want to have. And it's very important when you're dealing with the Soviet system to understand that it's really organized into an array of enclaves of privilege, you could say, in which people trade favors back and forth. For example, a writer, a member of the Union of Writers, has access to books that more easily than the ordinary person. A doctor has access to Western medicines. Well, they can trade. The doctor can get books from the writer, and the writer can get medicines from the doctor. The same with theater tickets. If you're an actor, you get it's easier to get theater tickets, and so forth. So this kind of relationship tends to blossom, especially in the cities, where there's a diversity of people, and they make their connections and do what's called blot, which is trade these favors.
But for every system, there's a counter system, there's a parallel system, the blot system. But one of the things that's happened in the last few years, and probably one of the few things that has changed substantially since the film of Fyodorov was made, is that a lot of the blot system has become a little more confused, because with the re-questioning of the values of the Soviet system, a lot of the old channels for your bribes or your favors have been disrupted, and people are openly complaining that they don't quite know how to get around the system anymore.
What do they do, Richard?
Well, they find ways of getting around the system, but funnily enough, my thoughts were running rather on a different line, because what intrigued me, watching it again, was that clearly medical systems and medical health are areas that are very complicated to organize. And I don't think we should all pat ourselves too much on the back, because, I mean, in England at the moment, the National Health Service is undergoing kind of strangulation by the government. I think the American system of health services leaves a lot to be desired in many, many ways.
It's certainly getting more expensive.
And I think clearly this is a very difficult area, and it might actually make sense for people from the various different systems and ways of doing to talk to each other about what exactly are the problems of organizing a health service. But certainly, if you happen to have a problem with your eye and you can get into his institute, then you're laughing. But the health service overall over there is pretty dreadful.
All right, just go ahead.
I was just going to say, to reinforce what Richard said, it's very erratic. If you happen to get into a good institute, you can get excellent care, and of course it's free. If you don't have access, or if
you say if you happen to.
If you happen, sometimes it's
not that accidental.
Sometimes it is accidental in the sense, I knew the wife of a friend of mine had heart problems and needed a quadruple bypass, and it so happened that her polyclinic, that is the local neighborhood clinic, had a doctor who knew a doctor in a very excellent cardiac institute in Moscow. And because of that personal connection, she got the operation quickly and done by the most skilled surgeon. And it did not require a bribe in her case, because she knew the right people. But that's happenstance, and you can't depend on it.
The other interesting thing, talking about how people get around it, is, of course, the Soviet Union, it must be one of the richest areas of alternative medicine anywhere in the world. I mean, there are hundreds of different types of medicine going on as alternatives to the official system.
What do you mean?
Well, in terms of kind of, and medical massage and herbal medicines. And my wife used to go out when she was feeling bad and hug a tree, because they believe they get strength from the tree.
Your wife was born in the Soviet Union, we should say. Yeah.
And so all sorts of extraordinary kind of little enclaves of medical practice exist around the periphery.
Are they considered as effective as what we think of as modern medicine?
By those who practice them, much more effective, yes. Particularly, and in many cases, of course, they are rather much more effective than the kind of medicine you can get access to.
But you need to open doors. I mean, I knew a doctor who was looking for typewriter ribbons once, and he couldn't find any anywhere. And he finally, out of desperation, he was at a stationery store, and he said to the saleswoman, "Do you have typewriter ribbons?" And she said, "Niet." And he said, "Well, you know, I'm a doctor, and if there's ever anything I could do," and she kind of brightened, because it turned out she needed an abortion. And she could go to, abortion is legal in the Soviet Union. It's one of the main methods of birth control, in fact. And she could go to her local hospital, but I think it was her sister-in-law worked there as a nurse, and she didn't want her family to know. She was unmarried, didn't want them to know. So she asked the doctor if he could get her into another hospital quickly, because she was approaching the 3-month time, and he said yes, he had a friend and so forth, and she reached under the counter and pulled out 2 typewriter ribbons. He had to pay for them, but he managed to do that through that method, and that's the way things work.
Just to clarify, though, the system hasn't changed all that much, for obviously in 3 short years, for most Soviet citizens. For most, it is much harder to get good medical care, and the sort of care that Fyodorov was attempting to offer is still a rarity in the Soviet Union.
Yeah. That certainly hasn't changed. And Fyodorov in the same way as he epitomizes many of the things that Gorbachev wants to do, to get very bright overachievers running the thing, his institute also epitomizes one of the sort of traditional strengths, if you like, of the Soviet system. If you had an extremely incompetent and chaotic medical system nationwide, perhaps, you also had these islands of extremely gifted people and great scientific progress. And there's always been this dichotomy in the Soviet system.
Why is that?
One reason may be that there's a problem of information. That is, information, like goods, is not always available to everyone, even within professions. I remember the American doctor at the U.S. Embassy having a case of an American woman who went into Botkin Hospital with a miscarriage, and she had to get a drug called Rogam, because she was Rh negative, to block the problems. And he went to the doctor at Botkin and asked about the drug, and the doctor knew nothing about the drug, had never heard of Rogam, although it was being widely used in the West. Well, the American doctor happened to know that there was a Soviet professor of medicine at another institution in Moscow who not only knew about the drug, but had the drug. So he went to her and got the drug and took it to this hospital. So there you have a very simple, clear case of the lack of the exchange of professional information, which is something that I think Gorbachev is trying to attack. And he may have an effect on this ultimately, because as professional journals and as well as the ordinary press become freer to report and discuss, and as exchange with the West becomes easier, you may get a better exchange of information of this kind.
We're going to talk about this with other films in the series, but this notion of Fyodorov being in a very privileged situation, getting to travel abroad and go into we saw him looking at luxury goods, the gun and so forth. How much of that are those in the privileged class in the Soviet Union going to be willing to give up under a different system?
That's, I think, what a lot of the privileged people are asking themselves. And what Gorbachev seems to be aiming to do is not so much destroy a lot of these privileges as to redistribute them. People like Fyodorov are seen to have warranted them by their work and by their achievements. The emphasis will be on rewards for work. There's a lot of deadwood.
So more privileges, is that what you're saying?
The same sort of privileges, perhaps to different people, if it works. And that means there are going to be a lot of very unhappy people who have been benefiting from this lifestyle for a long time, who are not going to be happy to see it disappear, or to face the prospect of it disappearing for their children.
Mm-hmm. Do you see that the same way, Richard?
Yes, I do. I think that one of the major problems he's going to face is that, as Paul was just saying, that privileges have been allocated, not on the whole, on the basis of merit. Now, we've just been looking at somebody who clearly has merited them. But there's an awful lot of people who haven't, and they're not going to like seeing their privileges eroded.
Well, who then, under the new system, would be entitled to some special, the access to restaurants, in some cases, better food?
Fyodorov summarized it in this film when he said, I have more privileges because I work more. And that's the approach they are pushing.
But by doing that, he does raise a very interesting problem. And he does it in his institute, that he is not egalitarian in his approach. And the fact is that is going to raise all these problems of if you're not good at your job, you lose your job, and all of these kind of things, which are an anathema in Soviet society, a real anathema, and people are not going to approve of it.
This runs up against a very powerful ethic in that society, which is the social contract that is unwritten but exists between the state and the people in terms of protections. And Richard's right, egalitarianism is there as an undercurrent of attitude in which privilege is frowned upon. It used to be that they wouldn't talk about privilege because it didn't exist. The ranking was something that was kind of unspoken.
Well, it's certainly very different from what I think many Americans think about the Soviet Union. You think that it's supposed to be a totally egalitarian, classless society.
One of the discussions that's going on right now is a repudiation of even the idea of egalitarianism at this stage in the revolution. And one of the mistakes of past leaders, as it's now phrased, was the excessive leveling down of salary scales. Salary scales, there's going to be a much broader differentiation. Last year, we were told by some of the reform economists that nobody would earn less than they do now, but a lot of people would have the opportunity to earn a lot more than they do. In fact, people are earning less in some factories which are incompetent or inefficiently run.
But that's only half the problem, because
it's the problem.
It is the problem. But on the other hand, you can encourage people to earn more, but at the same time, if they've got nothing to spend it on, why bother?
In a centrally planned economy, of course, you have to put privileges where you want the workers to go. So if you want them to go to particular parts of the country or particular factories, you've got to give them more.
Something for Gorbachev to remember. Thank you all for being with us. David Shipler, Paul Quinn Judge, Richard Denton. Frontline, I'm Judy Woodruff. Thank you and good night.
Frontline is produced for the documentary consortium by WGBH Boston, which is solely responsible for its content. Major funding for this special Frontline series was provided by this station and other public television stations nationwide. Additional funding was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. For a transcript of this program, please write to Frontline, Box 322, Boston, Massachusetts, 02134.